we want to extend our heartiest welcome to Miss Margaret Atwood, Mr. Patrick French, and to all of you, our esteemed guests. I'm delighted, in association with Bloomsbury, India, and with my co-director of the Literary Foundation of India, Avantika Sujan, to present to you this wonderful event, An Evening with Margaret Atwood in Conversation with Patrick French.
Thank you, Reid. Miss Atwood hardly needs an introduction, as she's one of the most celebrated writers living today. She is, amongst other things, a novelist, poet, essayist, soon-to-be graphic novelist, inventor, and activist. We're delighted to have her this evening speaking here with multiple award-winning and acclaimed historian and biographer Patrick French, who again, among other things, in the New York Review of Books, was described as the inventor of a new genre, the confessional biography, and is currently working on the authorized biography of Doris Lessing. Without further ado, we now turn over to Faiza.
I went outside and saw the queue, and in fact the remaining people who all want to lynch me. You hear a lot of sort of gloom quite often in publishing about, how people aren't reading any longer, and I was reminded of the quote on my copy of The Heart Goes Last, which is that those who wish to consign literary fiction to an early grave need to first deal with Margaret Atwood. And so Bloomsbury is incredibly proud for this to be happening today. I just wanted to very quickly thank the Habitat Centre for making this possible, with the support of the Literary Foundation of India, and JLF, in fact, for having her over here. Now, obviously, no one wants to look at me, so let's have a round of applause and welcome Margaret Atwood and Patrick French.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you to the India Habitat Centre for having us here this evening. A very warm welcome to anybody who is out in the cold watching on an audio or video link in the open air, and also hello to anybody watching at home on Doordarshan over the next few days when this is broadcast. Margaret Atwood, it's wonderful to be here in conversation with you. I was very struck during the Jaipur Literature Festival by the energy and warmth that you communicated to the audiences, and the way that you got an extraordinarily strong feedback to that. It was very noticeable, particularly for younger writers and younger women writers, that they saw you as somebody who represented a kind of ideal as a writer. There was a line in an Indian newspaper a few days ago when you said, insecure people can't go very far in life. If you have insecurities, then start writing under a pseudonym. And you give a very strong impression of that security, of that certainty, a great directness in your writing and in the way that you speak to audiences. Have you always had a degree of security about your work, or is it something that's come with success?
I think it's come with old age, which is a little bit different. So when you're 20, you don't know what the plot is going to be. So of course you're more nervous. And you're more nervous about how your actions may influence your future. But as your past becomes quite a lot longer than your future, you've got less to gamble about, don't you? So, so therefore you just go for it. And I think there is something about that. I think actually probably the worst time in a writer's life is the middle period. And you're not a young comer. You're not a young up-and-comer. There's actually a person at the Jaipur Literary Festival who was a 15-year-old novelist.
Oh, they get younger every year.
Imagine that. So when I was 15, I wasn't writing novels, I was just writing bad poetry. I haven't read this novel, but I'm going to. I think it's quite extraordinary. And then you, if you're lucky, you publish a book, maybe in your 20s or early 30s, and it's your first novel. And if you're lucky, maybe it gets some attention, and then you have to get over the hurdle of the second one, which is always more difficult because people expect things of you. And by that time, you've got enemies.
But let's go back to the
But
time.
when you get to the middle period, you're neither an old sage nor are you an up-and-comer. So you just have to get through the middle period.
So let's go back to the time before enemies, or at least before literary or critical enemies. You were born in 1939.
At the end of it.
At the in Ottawa, in Canada. It's a very different world, that sort of early days of the Second World War in Canada. What sort of a childhood did you have growing up in the remoter parts of Canada?
Well, Ottawa wasn't even the remoter parts. It was the capital city.
I was talking not about your opening years, but
Yes, opening years. Well, I was born in Ottawa, and therefore I learned to skate on the Rideau Canal, which was a man-made canal built in the 19th century to defend against invasion by the Americans.
yes.
Always.
We'll
So
come on
that's-
to Donald
that was in
Trump
the winter.
later in the evening.
Yes, right. I don't think we've registered yet on